Hello and welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Charles Swint,
And I'm your other host, Kate Balzer.
and we are two friends here who have been watching Buffy since the beginning. We're not a rewatch podcast. We explore the big bad themes of the show. This is a podcast full of spoilery goodness. So if you have not watched the entire series and don't want to be spoiled, pause now. Hey there, Kate.
Hi.
How's it going? Did I throw you off with that?
It was the long pause. I was like, what did I miss? I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Um, Things are good.
That's good. New year, new you.
Yes, new year, new me. Um, the old me was horrible, so I had to get rid of him. I said, enough of you, old me. Go somewhere with your 2024 vibes.
I'm done with you.
I'm done with you. Um, I'm get I'm feeling alive in 2025.
Excellent.
I'm
That's,
five by five in 2025.
oh, good. Which
But
literally is 25.
yes.
Love it. That'll be our slogan for the year. 5 by 5 in
5 by
2025.
2025. There we are.
So, kicking off the second half of season three, because we are continuing with the relationship theme for the year.
Yes. The first half of the season we were talking about romantic relationships and we explored all of those things. And this part of the season we're talking about uh the relationships of friends and family.
Yes, very big part of the Buffyverse for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely a huge part of I mean, the whole core of everything is, the Scooby Gang is the core of everything, which is arguably the nucleus family of the show is
Yeah,
is the
absolutely.
Scooby Gang. So, um,
Well,
friends, chosen family, all of those things.
yeah. I mean, you could even make an argument that relationships are even the largest part of the series over the supernatural.
Yes. And I mean, and also too, just the fact that the relationships you know the relationships to the supernatural and the idea that we all know that the sort of big theme that they started off with was high school as hell and the metaphors for all of that stuff. I think secondarily you could say that how do you get through this hellish thing is in the relationships that you form and the relationships um that develop out of these traumatic situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as much as I love the supernatural, and I do think it's a really helpful tool in storytelling and putting some layers and some metaphor to the storytelling. For myself, and I probably have said this on a previous episode, what keeps me coming back are the relationships and those
Oh,
stories. And
absolutely.
that's why you can watch it over and over again. I think if it was a series that was very episodic and wasn't as serialized as it is. I mean, you might come back to it, but it'll be like rewatching Law and Order the way people do, or rewatching like
Mhm.
CSI the way people do. It's sort of like comfort food in a different way.
Right.
But this is, I think this is has a bigger draw in those relationships as far as kind of like a meatier reason to come back to the show versus just like straight up comfort food.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like if it were just Monster of the Week, then it's not the same show
Right.
as if, that we have very these very dynamic and very loving relationships
Hmm.
and very unique relationships that we haven't seen on television before starting to form and how people are engaging with family and with friends in a different way, I think is incredibly important. And I think you're right. I think that is why we keep coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we get to the question for
I
today's episode?
sure, yeah.
So, our question that we're asking is, what is family in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
It is an episode in season 5.
Very true.
Bing, done.
All right, see you guys later. Hope you enjoyed the
Thanks so
episode.
much. This was an amazing. Make sure to like and subscribe.
It's not a small bite, it's a tiny bite.
It's just like a little nibble.
Yes. So I do want to kind of say to give a little background, because we tend to do this when we talk about sort of how we got to the question or some of our prep discussion that we have in leading up to doing the episodes, that this kind of evolved out of looking at parental figures in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and how most of them are okay to terrible with a lot of neglect in there. And so that kind of really evolved into actually like looking at what is family in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we kind of are starting from that perspective, how parental figures are shown in the series really help shape what is family in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, I think when you look at Buffy and you look at, you're looking at the show and what it is a teen show. It is a show
Right.
about teenagers fighting demons and fighting vampires and all of these things. And so the idea was that it wasn't about this wasn't a family show. It
Right.
wasn't like a show about like family, like 90210 or something like that, where it was like this family has moved to Beverly Hills, this family being the fish out of water or whatever. Or, this was about these teens being a fish out of water sort of situation and the supernatural element. So the writers didn't put a lot of emphasis on the quote unquote nuclear family. Like that's not the story that we're telling. And so we do get a lot of absentee family members, absentee parents, and and to some extent very neglectful and abusive parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And compared to other shows, like you were saying, other teen shows, um, you know, a lot of those shows have awful parents on them as well, like equal to some of the awful parents that are written on Buffy. But what the difference is, as you just said, you have such a lack of parents in the picture. Whereas even if parents aren't fully involved in a teen show, you're going to see them a lot more on those shows compared to Buffy. That's really, to me, one of the places Buffy separates itself from other teen shows.
And there's also, I mean, when you and thinking about the shows of the time, and or maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. So stop me if I am. But there's, the shows like that were the contemporaries on the same network that were
Hmm.
like geared towards the same sort of demographic. I'm thinking about like Everwood or
Right.
Seventh Heaven or any of those things that were all sort of family-based drama where the drama was based on the family dynamic and those sort of real life family things. They weren't genre shows for sure. And so, you know, bringing Buffy on and changing the paradigm of what that looked like created a different um created a different narrative of what family could look like or should look like. And I think that happens a lot in genre shows is um that the parents in that idea of like the nuclear family sort of starts to dissolve when you start adding in some of that supernatural element. It did in Buffy for sure. I think when you look at Supernatural, you've got the two brothers for sure, but like they also have like trouble with their father, and he's an absentee father and things like that. So I think that I don't know what that correlation is, if that is a coincidence, if that is um how that develops, but I think it's an interesting thing to notice that when we get into these things that when we get into genre shows specifically, supernatural genre shows, like what family looks like becomes very, very different than any other show.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point about like supernatural sci-fi shows because I've been rewatching or watching for the first time all the three shows in the Stargate universe, and it's kind of similar, very much team as family. And I
Hmm.
think what it is, and in those shows, they are also fighting these, super ginormous, galaxy-spanning enemies, the way that Buffy and the Scooby Gang and Giles fight these big bad, big bads. And so I think when you have that element, there just isn't in the storytelling time for a lot
Hmm.
of the family dynamics. I think that's partly you have to sacrifice it, or at least they choose to sacrifice it. Sacrifice it, I should say.
Right.
No, I don't know if another show could come along and say, no, we want to be supernatural or we want to be sci-fi, but we want more family in it, and make it work somehow. Um, so I think that's part of it. I remembered what my thought was from before, and it kind of relates to it. Not only do you not have like a focus on the nuclear family, but you don't have focus on like extended family either. Other
Sure.
on those other family and teen shows, at least an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of like the OC, they had extended family members there, and Gilmore Girls, and but in Buffy, Uncle Roy, I think that is literally the only family member
Right.
you see other than some of those other family members at the wedding, but like he gets mentioned by Xander multiple times before you meet him at the wedding.
Right.
But that's about it. Like nobody talks about grandparents, nobody talks about aunt and uncles. You're like,
Yeah.
are we assuming every parent is
As a
an only
single,
child?
well, and we do know that Joyce has a sister. We do know that Joyce has a
Oh, that's
sister
right,
because
Aunt
Aunt
Arlene.
Darlene, because that's where she goes for Thanksgiving during pain.
That's right. I
But
did forget
yeah,
about that.
there's no talk about like the extended pa family, the grandparents or anything
Right.
like that.
And it's like,
Throughout the season, it's like these families exist in a vacuum,
right, exactly.
and so that is clearly not a part of what they're trying to I mean, that's not the story that they're trying to tell,
Right.
clearly. But I think it's interesting that in ignoring traditional families, other families then show up.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's very much at the heart of Buffy. As you were saying, what you you need that in your life. So I think what that shows is people who don't have those kind of families or don't fit in their existing families, you eventually figured out with the other people in your life. So, found family very
Right.
much becomes sort of a natural outcome of those situations.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and in the case of Buffy, I mean, you're showing as like for the most part, people either rejecting or being rejected by their family, their like blood related family, and going to found family. But I think in real life, often people have both. I think
Sure.
very
Yeah.
rarely is it like one extreme that or the other. I mean, there's certainly people in situations have very toxic families, and have want nothing to do with them and only have found family, maybe until they themselves, get married, have kids. Um, but I think most of us exist between those two worlds. So it's interesting that again, Buffy sort of ended up that way, especially the fact that with Buffy being a Slayer and the metaphor of her coming out as a Slayer has been compared to coming out as um, gay or lesbian or bisexual
Hmm.
LGBTQ. And oftentimes there are people of those communities who have to leave their biological families and only exist with found families because they've been rejected. So it's really interesting that there's that comparison on two levels. I don't know
Hmm.
that it was necessarily conscious,
Right.
but you can certainly make that comparison.
Yeah, I think we talked about this offline a little bit,
Yeah,
and I think that there is sort of like it's a byproduct of everything that they're doing. It might not have been a part of like the mission statement that they went out to do, but I also it's really interesting that because when you look up like sort of the core definition of like what is family, when you
right.
start looking at that, it talks about being related by blood and all of this other stuff and like blood relations or adoption or and living in the household and things like that, where it does this very sort of heteronormative idea of what family is. But when you look at what a Slayer is and you look at Buffy, like that is a bloodline
Mm,
that excuse me, that gets passed down. So you know, intrinsically, like by that, like very pure definition of like family with a
hmm.
capital F, Slayers are part of a family. They just never get to meet. They're a part of the same bloodline, but they never actually meet each other because they die before, like, that is their heritage. That is their family lineage. What's her name? Denise? Is that her name? The one before Buffy from the book? Is it?
Oh,
Oh,
no, it's
no, not Denise.
I can't remember, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, it's a really good point. I mean, because they do refer to themselves as sisters.
yeah, like so. Yeah, so that is her family. That is her
Right.
inherited family
Yeah.
that she is a part of. But she never gets to meet except when she meets, um, you know,
Kinder than Faith. Yeah.
yeah, Kendra and Faith, and then and then all the potentials,
Right.
um, and the
Which,
first Slayer.
right. Which again, activating all the potential slayers goes back to how, or make the comparison to how Buffy creates the found family
Hmm.
on the show with Willow and Giles and Xander and the other people that they bring into it. And she creates that again with Willow's help in activating all the slayers, that she's really the center
Right.
of both found families.
Right. Um, So it's an interesting thing. So I was reading something. I was reading, let me cite this source. It's from Slayage, from the Journal of the Whedon Studies Association, and it is in an article by I believe Kristen Stevens, and the article is called "Meet the Cullens: Family Romances and Female Agency in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Twilight." So, and I'm going to paraphrase the bejesus out of this but I think it's a really interesting. Um, I think there's a very interesting point in this is that it's saying that sort of a byproduct of all of this is that the family structure is so patriarchal
Hmm.
by nature, like father, mother. And what Buffy does is that it takes the family structure and it makes the patriarchal structure of it the enemy in it. And so
Mm,
it doesn't, so having that, so holding on to like a traditional family structure is actually really dangerous. Because when we look at things like Ted, when we look at things like um, family, when we
mm,
look at episodes, when we look at anything dealing with the council, who would be by extension, I guess, be like the grandparents of Buffy, if you consider Giles to be, if we're like making a family structure, like as Buffy as the child, Giles is the
yeah,
father,
right.
and the council is like the grandparents or whatever, and aunts and uncles, then like that structure is actually the thing that is actually the most dangerous
Hmm.
to Buffy. And when we look at family and we start talking about family, the first mention of family actually comes from Darla when she talks about I have family in town and welcome to the Hellmouth, referring
Right.
to the master and all of that stuff, and the master being the head of his family and being the ultimate danger in her life.
Hmm.
So I think it's an interesting thing that a traditional family in this universe actually is harmful, and and like the dysfunction of the family is the thing that is basically the thing that saves them. Like the fact that they find each other and create their own family is the thing that saves them because their own natural family units, Joyce, Xander's parents, Willow's mom are actually the things that put them in danger, especially when
Oh,
you look at like gingerbread
oh yeah, exactly. Or band candy
or band
even.
candy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I also think that leads to the consequences of season six. The
Mm,
fact that they've been neglected in so many ways, even though, obviously out of all the parents, Joyce is the best, but she obviously has her own flaws, and all parents are going to have flaws. But I think for Joyce, it was more like they didn't know how to incorporate her enough, or maybe they wanted to do that on purpose. So I think at heart, she's a good parent, but like so many others, she's absent a lot, partly because of the job they give her requires her to travel and she's a single mom. And then, they just basically don't deal with Hank at all. They don't try to really make him a part of Buffy's life, or they tried early on, maybe they felt it didn't work. Um, and so because of that, you have I think this consequence of when everything is going to hell in season six. So you not only have like dealing with mental illness, dealing with a bad addiction metaphor, as
right.
we talked about with Jenna, um, and all of those elements. They also, in a lot of ways, although Xander probably not so much because he was forced to grow up when he left high school and his parents were like charging him for rent immediately. They don't have a lot of the life skills yet, and they don't have anyone there to keep supporting them and teach them and help them learn from their mistakes because none of
Mhm.
them have these parents in their lives, either through neglect or, in Buffy's case, now death.
Right.
So to me, that's part of why season six is so terrible. It's not if they were going through the things they were going through, like Willow's situation with her abuse of magic and with Buffy dealing with her depression and trying to find herself again after being resurrected. If they had adults in their lives who they could rely on, and multiple, not just down to one who then also abandons them. Cough, Giles, cough.
Right.
Um, that'll be a future episode. But I don't know that it wouldn't have season six wouldn't probably not have been as hellish,
Well, yeah, for
on
sure.
every level.
Well, and I think that just goes back to the fact that like these absent parents, like it's actually their family that is the thing that is causing them some of the greatest harm in their life, not the monsters that they fight every week, but
Right, right, right.
their actual families. Like they're not getting those life skills, even though Giles says later on, he's like, well, your mother taught you everything about, being a woman, and I taught you everything about being a slayer. But Joyce didn't do that. Like Joyce,
No,
she really didn't do. I mean, you can argue that there was some off-screen stuff that happened or whatever.
right.
And yes, she grew up, and Buffy is a very smart and intelligent and resourceful young woman who has some really amazing skills that she probably got some of that from her mother,
Hmm.
absolutely. But a lot of that is stuff that she picked up on the streets and like picked up from being a slayer and had to develop those things on her own, while Joyce is reading parenting books and being like, well, I have to read like all the parenting books say I need to say no and blah 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 blah. And it's like, but you're also, again, but Joyce, you're not around. And I get it. You're doing your level best. You didn't ask to be a single parent. You didn't ask to have to leave LA to move to Sunnydale. Like you were dealing with the hand that you were dealt.
Hmm.
That being said, you were also not around 90% of the time. While your daughter is out at all hours of the night, out all night, doing whatever, and all of them are. And there are no consequences for any of them for being out all night.
Yeah, exactly. And she never really comes to fully accept, well, maybe she accepts, but never really fully comes to understand Buffy being called as a Slayer. So I think because of that, nobody sits there and figures out, like, yeah, it's great for Buffy to go to college and get an education because I think you can always gain something from that. But like, let's be practical. She's never gonna like go on to law school, become a cop like her aptitude test told her to, like
Right.
that's not gonna happen. And so if she lives long enough where she has to have money from a job because she's now out, reaches adulthood, that's still not going to happen. Like, why is nobody setting up like the parameters for Buffy to have a viable income source? I mean, granted, we all
Right.
know that the council should pay her. The fact that the council
Right. The
doesn't pay her,
council
it's
should
like
just be paying her.
that's
And
a whole nother thing. But like, okay, in the face of that, like, why are we not having conversations with Buffy? She needs to be a part of it, but like maybe it's Joyce setting up like a trust fund or, like Buffy just is not going to have that kind of 2.0, 2.5 kids and a picket
right.
fence. And like, it's just not going to happen.
Also,
And
what
Joyce never gets to that point where she accepts it and starts to shift her thinking and her planning for Buffy's, at the time, assumed limited future.
right. Also, question that maybe no one knows. What happened to Joyce's art gallery when she died?
Oh my God, great question. That is never, ever, ever dealt
Like,
with.
why?
I don't,
Like, that is
I
a
mean,
business that she owned. Like, she owned that gallery.
right.
What happened to all of that? I mean, and like, you can't, I know hospital bills are expensive, but are you
Yes.
telling me that her life insurance and all of that, like everything that she set up for Joyce, anyway, that is a whole nother discussion that we have
Yeah.
had before, that the Scoobies mismanaged her funds
Right.
completely.
Right. I mean,
She
I
was
know that,
gone for a year. Like, she was not even gone a full year, and y'all squandered through all of her money. Mm-mm.
yeah,
Nope,
in that
don't buy
episode
it.
in season 6 where they discuss Buffy's finances after she's resurrected, I can't remember if they talk about the gallery, but if they do, it's like for like a fraction
I don't think they
of the
do,
conversation.
though.
Because you're right,
Yeah,
because either she has this entire gallery full of art that she's bought to sold or it's on consignment so it either needs to be sold or go back to the original artist, so like then I'm sure she had an assistant and you're paying for space, like there's so many
there's so
practical
many
questions.
things that I have about that.
I
I don't know.
know. I
That's
mean, I guess that's what this and fanfic is for, but at the same time I'm like
right, and
sometimes like
no one cares about the admin. Like, at the end of the day, like when you're
right.
watching this show, no one's like, "What about the admin? I need to know what's going on. What about her
Except
401k?"
I know, except to me as a practical person who's had like all of this drilled in by my own very involved father, like I mean that in a good way involved. I do think about this stuff when I watch the show. I mean, I think it gets more so when you rewatch and you're like, I know all the emotional beats. Now it's all about like the details. Where did they do this? How did they deal with this? Like, why doesn't she have this for money? Like, you're like, yeah, you can't help
It's so, yeah. There's
but
so many
ponder those
things.
details.
You just like, this is the harm of watching a show over and over
Correct.
again for 20 years, because now you're
Uh,
like,
yeah. That is why I had to stop watching for a long period of time because I got to the point where I was like, just very critical of all of that stuff. And I was like, yeah, now I'm losing my love for the show. I need to walk away because I'm not remembering why I love this show because I've gotten so caught up in the minutia that they're
of it all.
not answering the question to.
You're treating this very poorly. You're treating this woman very poorly. And I have,
Exactly.
and it's so, um, you know, gosh. But yeah, so I mean, we've got all of these, we've got all of these like absent, neglective parents. We've got,
Hmm.
we have Joyce is present for as long as she can be, as
Right.
much as she can be, but could be, there is an argument to be made that she is sort of a neglectful parent. I mean, the Scoobies are very much like the last of the latchkey kids on,
Yeah.
we're here. Hank just disappears, like he's just gone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Like all of a sudden, like we only see him again in Normal again, but it's like, and that's, a psychotic, you know, a psychosis,
Right.
imagining of Hank. It's not him. Um, you know, we know nothing about Willow's dad, really.
We just know that he is
We know
very
she,
into being Jewish and couldn't imagine, and Willow's scared to have a cross in her room because she's like the daughter of Ira Rosenberg,
right.
you know.
We
which
know
is
she
interesting.
has a dad.
Yeah, exactly,
That's
exactly,
about it.
exactly. And the interesting thing is the fact that like she does her Judaism, comes up every once in a while. Not that we see her practice, and maybe it doesn't mean anything to her, but it's interesting that she keeps talking about her father because um, you know, Judaism is matrilineal. So I was always
Yeah.
curious to know if her mother was also Jewish or not,
Mm.
which may explain why Willow may not actually be a practicing Jew. It may just be her
Right.
father.
I think it might be her. I always got the intention that it was her father who was,
Same.
and that her mother was not, because there was nothing about um Charlotte. Is that her mother's name?
No, Sheila.
Sheila. That although yeah, but I just didn't get the sense that Sheila cared much about you know.
I agree. It's never stated, but that was sort of my assumption as well, that Sheila was not Jewish and Ira is. Only
Right.
Ira is. So yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I want to circle back to something you said earlier when you were quoting from that Slayage article. What's interesting, I didn't think about this until you were summarizing the points from the article, but at the time Buffy is happening, and we already made some comparisons to coming out as LGBTQI. You also have, you know, that gay and lesbian, particularly at the time, we didn't, weren't using LGBTQI yet as much. It was really focused on gay and lesbian um, people that obviously they were growing as an out community. I mean that in like, sort of both senses because of the AIDS epidemic. And so there was the fight, and that really brought a lot of it out. And then you saw it coming into pop culture. So what's interesting about that is at the time that Buffy is breaking these um, norms of family, that is happening in real life with um, the homosexual community.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that like
Yeah.
comparison again, where there's a lot, and again, I don't necessarily think we were doing that on purpose. I think it's more a product of multiple things that are kind of similar happen at the same time because that's where culture and society is.
Yeah, and I think it's again, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily like who knows? Maybe it was on the big board.
Yeah, good
But
point.
not, but I mean, there was definitely there was definitely a cause to be like one of our characters is going to come out as gay. Is it going to be Xander? Is it going to be Willow? I think
Right.
Willow. Okay, so Willow, we're making this choice to Willow, so she's going to be gay, and we're going to do this. And and you're right. I think like as we started to see the rise of, queer people on television and queer people in media and all of that stuff and that reflection in there, then yeah, I think it is, again, it's not like a part of the capital M mission, but it was probably like a subplot of what was going on was
Sure.
like, yeah, let's start reflecting some of what community is looking like, and what we see to reflect that into the world. And so, Tara and Willow raising Dawn, and
Right.
you've got this, we've got these two lesbians raising a child, and like late 90s, that would have been 2001,
2001.
yeah,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. So like again, still kind of early on
Oh,
in
very much.
in that
I mean,
conversation.
there were probably states where you weren't allowed to adopt children. I mean, there definitely
Yeah.
was no marriage equality yet,
I mean, there's
other than maybe,
still states where
yeah,
you,
yeah.
where you can't.
I don't even think that had happened in Massachusetts yet, because I think Massachusetts was the first state to do it. If I have that wrong, I apologize.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, totally agree. So it was definitely like ahead of the curve in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So make it so bringing that type of family to to television and being like, oh, look, here it is. And Dawn being perfectly okay with it. And we see that Dawn really likes this family structure. Like this is a
Hmm.
family structure where she has felt, despite the fact that she has lost her mother and lost her sister, actually has probably been is the healthiest that she has ever been, and is in a more stable relationship that in a stable family relationship than she's ever been when she is being raised by Willow and Tara.
Right, which demonstrates that really what kids need is just stable, loving people in their
Hmm.
lives.
Yeah,
They give them guidance and structure, but also show them love. And what I think is interesting too, that really demonstrates how this idea of the nuclear family, which really only came into being in like the 50s,
right.
and you know, particularly US society. I mean, before that, you you definitely had patriarchal ideas of the family, but it wasn't necessarily only nuclear. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, uh, you know, all of that was a part of raising the family and or raising children being a part of the family. And that's certainly true of non-Western cultures. I mean, that's been shifting a bit, but that has stayed, that extended sense of extended family, I think has stayed much longer from my understanding. Again, not an expert, just having known people who were raised in other cultures and other types of family, um, has existed for much longer, has continued for much longer than it has in Western society.
Right. Um, so yeah, and the Scoobies are not the only ones who lacked parents when we're
Right.
talking about family and the Buffyverse. I mean, you look at Angel,
Everybody did.
everybody did. Like everyone had it. Like Angel had daddy issues. I mean,
Wes,
Wes and his dad,
right.
um,
Amy,
Amy and her mom,
as
Faith and her mom.
right. As great as Oz is, we've never heard anything about his parents.
Except,
Oh,
oh,
that
he's got extended family that we know about
I was just
because
gonna say
of
that's
his
the only
cousin.
other one. I forgot about that. Right, because his cousin turns him into a werewolf and he has to talk to his aunt. But other than that, yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but again, trauma. Like
Yes.
like the fact that in every instance, their actual family, their blood related family, was a source of danger to
Hmm.
all of them
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form. And clearly stated with Tara and her family. I mean, that's such a huge example of that where, they use this idea of a demon, that
Hmm.
she's a demon to control the women in their family, um, and to hold them back and to hold them down, and how your family, and sometimes that your family is not your safe space.
Right.
And that is clearly an ongoing theme
Yeah.
throughout the entire series, is that
Right.
chosen family
Absolutely.
can be a
I mean,
better
it also
solution.
it also seeps into the non-traditional family that they form.
Right.
In some ways, the show kind of hates family.
Just in general.
But I mean, if you think about it, obviously there's normal back and forth between family members, whether that's biological or found family. So nobody's looking for somebody to be like perfect and everyone get along all the time. That's not
Right.
realistic. That does not happen. I mean, you might be better communicators and get along better in certain families than you do in others. But like for example, I think the greatest example of where that really shows is Empty Places.
Mm.
When they gang up on Buffy and then not only gang up on her, kick her out into the streets where there are like Uber vamps and Preacher Man
Caleb
and
out
you're
there
yeah,
running around.
Caleb out there. Exactly. I couldn't think of his name. Thank you. And you're like, do we really like really? I know Buffy's like tough, but it's been proven that she can also get her ass kicked. So do you really want to send her out there?
Yeah, it
You
just, yeah,
know?
that whole thing, like if this is your that's like kicking your mom out of your house, right? Like I mean,
Yeah. And poor
it's
Buffy had it done to her twice because Joyce did it to her.
right, right. And so,
Um,
what does that do to you when you start to look at what family is, whether
mhm.
it's chosen family or whether it's blood family? Um, and they've turned on you multiple times because they don't understand.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what it is. Like Joyce kicks her out because she doesn't understand really like the gravity of what's going on and hasn't had a chance to process really what's going on. Where an empty place is like everyone knows what's going on. They just don't like it and they're all really afraid of what's going on. And they
Right.
and that fear gets blamed on Buffy. Like it gets misplaced and put, they're like, well, you're in charge, so like, we're scared and everything is wrong, so it must be your fault.
Right. And I think actually it makes me think back to a comment that Jenna made in our bonus episode for the romantic relationships season half of our season, where she talked about how important communication is. And that is often
Hmm.
where relationships break down. And I think that is incredibly true on the show. But again, as she pointed out, good communication doesn't necessarily make for good television.
Right.
Um, I do think you can have better communication and still have good television.
Yes. Yeah. And there are
But I
things, yeah.
no, I was just going to say so that's a lot of that. They're in a lot of ways they're so bad at communicating with each other until they're really forced to. And
Hmm.
usually they're forced to like there's emotional conflict between them, but then the outside conflict becomes bigger. So they're like, okay, we have to get back together and work together anyway. And so maybe we do a little communicating, but like we've never actually fully solved the issue.
Right.
Um,
Which is so clear in Dead Man's Party. Like that's,
oh,
I mean, that's,
100%.
I mean, that's sort of the antithesis of all of it is
Correct.
we're really pissed at each other and we're fighting
Yep.
like and in the middle of this fight that we're trying to get to the root of stuff that we're not listening to each other or understanding each other's point of view, but we know how to do this thing together.
Right.
This is the thing that we do best is fight the forces of evil together.
Yeah.
And so maybe we don't understand each other and our points of view, and maybe we never will. But the thing that we will always do is we will stand up for each other when it comes to, the outside threat, which is what family does. Like you can pick
Hmm.
on your brother all the time. Like I'm sure
Right.
you and your brother pick on each other all the time. But the second that someone outside is like, well, oh, your brother's a blah, wait, hold on now.
A hundred
You
percent.
don't get to say that. We get to do that. You don't get to do that.
It's so true. It is so
Um,
funny how that is true across the board. It's like, oh, I
yeah,
can pick on whatever family member, but the minute somebody outside does, you're like, nope.
them's fighting words.
Yeah, exactly.
Hands me my steak.
Exactly.
Oh my
So I know
goodness.
we've discussed sort of a lot of like downsides, negative aspects of family in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Are there positive aspects to it in the series?
Well, I do think that when they all come together when Joyce passes, like the
Yeah.
Scoobies coming together and being there for her, and sort of, and being a support system for her, even though they don't know how to deal with it. They're like, I don't know what we're doing, but we have to be there for her. Is again is a testament to family. I think all of them rallying to take care of Dawn
Hmm.
after Buffy dies. Again, it's all like, or even honestly, even when Buffy leaves, when Buffy just ups and goes to LA for the summer and they stick around in Sunnydale to sort of like pick up the slack. They didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
They could have just been like, well, I guess we'll go off and do our own thing now.
Yeah, they could have just been like, oh well, now we're gonna be overrun because the Slayer's gone. We'll just go back to what it was before Buffy came here.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
good point.
So I don't, I mean, I think, so I do believe, and even, and to an extent too, being there for Xander
Hmm.
during the wedding
Yeah.
and the subsequent fallout of that. Like family is being there when times are good, when times are bad, and are people who love you even like despite your shortcomings, and they love you anyway. Like that's your ride or dies. So I feel like they were in it. I mean, Willow going through all of her addiction and break up
Hmm.
with Tara and all of that stuff. They were there. Willow coming out, Buffy was there for her. I mean, and again, that's what friends do, but at this point, she didn't come, like, we don't ever have any indication that she came out to her mom
She
about,
talks about that with Kennedy in their date. She did at some point, but her mom was like, I can't remember what she said, but yeah, I mean, we never see it, but she does talk
yeah,
about that with Kennedy in season 7.
um,
But yeah, she doesn't get the same reaction that she gets from Buffy. Buffy steps
yeah,
up as like a real loved one.
yeah.
Can, in the best way possible.
All right. What about you?
Y
Do you see?
Yeah, I mean, some of this, will be for our Giles Buffy episode, but certainly in the high school days, I think Giles shows some really great
Hmm.
fatherly behavior. I think I mentioned this. Oh, I think in a previous episode, I definitely mentioned this, but it is one of my favorite moments between them. But after they realize what's happened with Angel and Jealous, after they slept together, and he's dropping
Yeah,
her off, and he's like, I'm not here to punish you. I'm not here to scold you. Like, I'm just here to support you. And you're like, that's a great parenting moment.
right.
Oh, Giles, why did you have to stop doing that? But yeah, it's like one of my favorite moments.
Yeah,
It's such a great example um with them.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of love between all of them, and you don't really necessarily doubt that throughout the series, even with all the ups and downs in their relationship. Um, in the end, they'll always have each other's back, which is, kind of all you can ask from friends and family.
right. That's the best thing you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and like so much on Buffy is a Rorschach test for your own experiences. So some of this may feel not that we're not saying it's not believable, but it may feel more some people maybe relate to it more because they've had similar parental experiences or lack of parental experiences.
Yeah,
Whereas, like, I think that's why it frustrates me. I'm very lucky. I've had great parents. Well, they're still with us. I have great parents who've been like supportive throughout my life. It didn't stop when I turned 18. I've seen that happen with like other families.
right,
So for me, I think that's why it like really can get me angry sometimes because I'm like, it can be different. It
right.
can be better. And I want that for the characters. I'm not, again, nobody's perfect, but it can be
Sure.
better.
Right. You do have good parents.
I do.
They are
I
pretty great.
do. I hope
Um,
they don't listen to this episode. No, I'm just kidding. I I shouldn't have admitted it on tape.
now they'll be like, you love
Yeah,
us.
exactly. Exactly.
Ooh, everybody knows you love us.
Exactly. Well, and I'm one of those adults who like became really good friends with my parents. Like,
Yeah,
so it's, my relationship with them morphed that way. I mean, I hang out with them as much as I hang out with any like friends.
yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, and I think it is. I do think that how you view the families on the show can be colored by how
yeah.
you were raised and what and your own familial experience is like. I mean, I would say I had a good upbringing. My parents are pretty cool. We don't always agree on everything, and
Yeah.
but there's definitely a strong respect for them. My God, I love them, and that's the thing is that they have sacrificed a lot
Hmm.
um to really kind of like give me the life that I had. And sometimes I
Hmm.
was like, I don't want that. Sometimes I was the, petulant child that was like,
As
this
long
is
as
my
as long as you were an actual child
life. No, I was an
versus like
adult one.
I was like, don't be 50 and that way.
This was yesterday, Kate.
Oh, God, Charles.
This was yesterday, my stunted childhood. Um, still constantly um throwing tantrums with my parents. That's fun. No, but like as an adult now, though, I do have, I have a good relationship with them and, talk all the time. And so, so I do see, so there is room for like healthy relationships to grow, but it again, it takes both parts to like work on those things too. Like everyone has to be willing to work on the
Yeah.
relationship in order to make that happen. It's
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing too. I think people um don't always recognize any kind of relationship takes work.
right.
And if you don't put the work in to be cheesy, it's not going to work out.
Sure. No, absolutely. Like you can't just
Yeah.
be like, I'm doing all the work
Yeah.
and this person is just sitting there continuing the same behavior or ignoring behaviors or not communicating with you and expecting it to work, which is why that whole situation with Joyce and Buffy blows up in season two. It's like why
Hmm.
she gets so frustrated, why she's like, what do you like being like, you're the adult in this situation. God, why can't you see what's been going on? The
Hmm.
weird occurrences, the blood everywhere. Like, I don't understand how you don't see it. It's
Right.
so like I am doing everything except staking a vampire in front of your face, which now I have to do. Like I've done everything except this, so I don't under like what do you think is possibly going on? And why, as a parent, have you not come to me?
Hmm.
I can't tell you because it puts you in danger. It's a dangerous situation. It's my like sacred duty or whatever. But, but again, that's kind of contrived because other families have been told, and Joyce was never in any more or less danger once she knew, really.
Right. Right. No.
Um, but it was
In
sort of
some ways, she might have been less just because she was at least aware and prepared.
of what was happening around her.
Right.
But she was always kind of told, like Buffy had always been sort of told, don't tell anybody.
Right.
She was sort of conditioned to keep the secret, which sucks for her because then she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? This is the most important person in my life, who is my mother, and now I can't tell her, and I'm not supposed to talk to her about this big thing. So yeah, that fight completely makes sense. It's like, ugh, I need an adult.
Hmm.
And, you know,
Well, and then Joyce and Giles go the opposite way in season three at the beginning of Band Candy. And Buffy is, they're still like basically in some ways, I think, passively aggressively punishing Buffy for having run away that summer.
right,
And then they overschedule her and they're trying to tamp down on her. And she's like, guys, I still need to live my own life. Like, I get
right.
it.
I don't need this much active parenting.
Correct. And it is. I mean, it's hard. It's a fine line. And,
Yeah.
there's no one way to be a parent or a parental figure. You really have to be, it seems to me, adaptive because every child is going to be different.
Hmm.
I think where people get in trouble is when you have, and this is true across relationships, not just parent-child, when you have a preset idea or mindset of what the relationship should be or how the person should behave and you don't, and then the person's not that, and you can't deal with it, that's where I think, obviously greater conflict and tension comes up,
Hmm.
and you have a harder time managing that relationship.
Well, and you see a lot of parents talking about how how much their children sort of reflect their own
Hmm.
bad behaviors back at them, and
Yeah.
that's frustrating to have to face that. And it's like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, but then they think about it and they're like, well, that's exactly how I would respond to this situation, or this is exactly what I did as a kid. And so when you're confronted with sort of your own flaws or the parts of yourself that you're like, I really wish I could work on, like that's that's the moment right there, is the opportunity to work on yourself.
Hmm.
And so probably a lot of stuff that Buffy went through, Joyce was probably like we can tell in Band Candy that Joyce is
Right.
like was a
Hmm.
very rebellious, teenager. And so instead of instead of Joyce reading the books of what she should do, she should have just talked to Buffy more about what was going on. Because when they have the moment when she talks about when she tells Joyce about sleeping with Angel, and that moment kind of happens, and she's like, "Oh, we just had the talk." It wasn't like this big, huge,
Yeah.
sit down thing, but it was a naturally occurring moment that sort of was a lovely, nice moment to be like, okay, here's the line of communication. This is what communication looks like. Actual communication looks like,
Right.
in those situations. And so, um, you know, sometimes you got to put the books down and just talk to your kids.
Right.
Says the man with no kids. Um,
Yes. It's very true.
so any final thoughts on this?
Family's messy, man.
It is messy. Family is messy. Save that. Um, family is the one you slay with.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts on your end?
No, that was it. Family's the one you slay with.
All
That
right.
was my final thought.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we're looking forward to discussing more of Family and Friends in this half of season 3. If you are not already doing so, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at A Buffy Podcast, or you can email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com. And please rate, review us, share. All of that helps more people to find us and more people to listen. And we really hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.